I almost quit teaching because it was just not as interesting, as exciting, as fun to teach.
Welcome to UpTech Report. I'm your host, Alexander, and this is our Apply Tech series. UpTech Report is sponsored by TerraLeap. Learn how to leverage the power of customer stories at terraleap.io. Today, I'm excited to be joined by my guest, Narine Hall, who's based in Vermont. She's the co-founder and CEO at InSpace. Welcome, Narine. Good to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Great to be here.
InSpace is a video conferencing platform built for education. Unpack this for me, Narine. What's the problem? Let's start with there. What's the problem that you solve with InSpace?
Yeah, happy to talk about it. So, we started InSpace because when pandemic started, I was teaching machine learning and data science at Champlain College. And, I was like, okay, this is awesome. Like I have all my content and everything, and it should be fine, right? So as we moved to online teaching, I found that online instruction was very different than in-person instruction. And, there are lots of constraints and limitations. And for me, one of the biggest things was like really being able to connect with students and have the same efficiency in learning that we had in, in-person environment, whether it's through like project work, hands-on experiences, really like creating knowledge with students in a classroom, not just sort of in a lecturing sort of setting. And I always been sort of in this part of like active learning and sort of learning by doing sort of mindset. So, so the challenge for me was that the video conferencing platforms that were available to me, even though it was awesome that even something was available, right? They were just not enough. And sort of that's kind of where I was like, oh, I almost quit teaching because it was just not as interesting, as exciting, as fun to teach. And at that point, me and my co-founder, we sat down and we're like, could it be the technology? What if we change that? And so the whole idea of InSpace came together. And what we did, it was like really like, let's forget everything that's out there. Let's start from scratch. How would we build a video conferencing that's just for educators in education setting, nothing else, like no one else matters? And that's how we started InSpace.
The singular focus, nothing else matters, specifically built for educators by an educator, but also a technologist. Like, let's solve this problem. Coming back, because I'd like to dig into the technology itself and how you're using it in the business use cases. But the problem that you experience in COVID-19 arrives. Everything is going online. It's definitely less than ideal. You were like, you wanted to quit it. I didn't even realize you wanted to quit it because it just was not fun. What are some of those issues that arose then? Is it just, you said, lack of interaction? What was some of the things that came out of this?
Yeah, a lot of, educators who were doing this virtually kind of know this, like the pain points, right? So one of the things is like engagement, student engagement, right? So like in a real classroom, when we had discussions, like we'd be talking about sort of machine learning for all, like all this really exciting concepts, and people would contribute and have this really fun conversations where like you're really getting into like this, light bulb moments when students realize something and now they're pumped up and they go learn about it more and they're motivated. All of a sudden they're building a whole career around this concept that sort of started in the classroom. And all of that seemed to disappear, right? So like, of course, at this point, I was kind of doing what I call video conferencing gymnastics. I was trying every possible way, and like a lot of people got really better at this as the time went on, like how you can use different things to kind of make it more engaging. But really the biggest thing was like student engagement, right? So the ability to like really participate, like very quickly, everybody turns their videos off and now you're teaching to black squares, which is not a fun experience. It's like talking to the wall a little bit, right? And so for me, it was, there's also like some psychological factors in there, right? So like when you're in a classroom, everybody feels like they belong to that space. We can all have visibility into what's going on, where people are. And like, if I want to go have a conversation and ask a question to a student, or a student wants to ask a question to a teacher, you can do that in the real space. This was something you can do in a virtual setting because it was one person talks, everybody else listens kind of environment. And it can get very hard to sort of create those moments where you just want to go talk to your peer for a minute and connect on something, right? So as we were thinking about InSpace, that was one of the first things that came up. What happens in a real classroom, right? Like you have this freedom of movement. You can get up and go talk to whoever you want. And that's kind of where we started. We brought the freedom of movement, everybody's video circle. You can click on it, you can move it around. When you get close to people, you can hear them and talk. As you go away, the sounds go down, so you can go talk to others, while everybody visually still see where everybody else is. So like everybody's in this space together, it's our classroom, but at the same time, I can have one-on-one conversations and everybody is relevant and kind of participating.
So let's dive into that a bit more. You've already just started to describe the visual look to it, the interaction, the dashboard. So less on the video side, is audio with just squares, or is there a video feed? How describe that to me?
Okay, so no squares in InSpace. So it's kind of interesting. We actually have video circles. And the reason it's a circle, because it's just a little bit more softer shape and it looks a little bit more like a person's head. And so your video is covering your head, so there's less background. So the focus is the person, just like it should be. So in some ways, like we have seen students were less intimidated to turn their cameras on because they were less worried about what's happening in their background, because it's really just their person that's in there. And then so what's happening is every person has a video circle. You can click on your circle and you can move it around the space. And the background can be anything the host wants to put. Like it could be your school background, it could be a classroom, anything you like. And so what happens, like when you get close to other video circles, you hear them and talk. As you move away, the sound kind of slowly goes away and you can't hear them anymore, but you can still see them and you can have conversations on the side and you can have a group conversation. You know, like psychology professors, they love doing this circle discussion. So they'll have everybody make a circle and they'll have this conversation. And if someone is late, when they come in, everybody moves a little bit, give them a little space. And it's very inclusive kind of discussion environment.
So are you giving like this opportunity where just naturally, students would congregate in over in a little corner and maybe even goof off a little bit? You're actually providing an opportunity for that.
It's interesting. That's exactly what it is. Like before the class starts, like usually like the space is available to them so they can hop in there and kind of spend a little time. And what we found is having that like little icebreaker interactions before the classes really helps them to then focus on the class and be more effective during the class time. Or at the end of the class, how usually some students have questions, they want to come and talk to the professor, clarify something, or just chat to each other. Those are the moments that really create those natural classroom environment interactions.
Interesting is these hallway conversations or corner conversations that can now naturally spring up because people have, you mentioned the freedom of movement. I mean, we've talked about this metaverse. I mean, would you consider this actually entering or playing a role in this future of Web 3.0?
Okay, so metaverse is an interesting topic. So without kind of going too deep into it, it definitely has certain elements of it. So it's very much 2D, like you're not in a sort of virtual fantasy world or anything like that. But what's interesting about so one of the things is like we use like backgrounds that are real images. So it feels very real. It doesn't feel like sort of vectors, etc. But at the same time, you do have that freedom of movement and it does create a little bit of that immersive experience. So for example, one of the professors who teaches history, they had like this very interesting scene from historical perspective. And so what they had students literally follow from one point to the other and then zoom into specific areas of that scene and kind of talk about what was actually happening there at that point in history. And that was like a very immersive experience. And one time I popped into one of the discussion rooms where a professor invited me. She was teaching French. And the way she had everything set up, like when I went in there, it felt like I was in Paris. It was like I could almost smell the croissants. And it was very immersive. And like, there's like screen sharing on different breakout rooms with like French in there and the backgrounds and everything. So, but at the same time, it's not like you don't have different views where you go between different views and like you don't know where everybody else is. At any one time, you always see all your students at the same place.
It's a 2D immersive experience of a metaverse. We're not all there yet. We don't have headsets on.
Exactly. It's a 2D metaverse. I love that.
Yes. 2D metaverse that making that possible, but it's that freedom of movement. Now, the question I can imagine that teachers would have, great, I'm giving freedom to my students to go off and go around and do other things. Can I corral them? Can I bring them back? Is that a problem? And how have you solved that?
Absolutely. Now, sort of being developed by a teacher, you might imagine this was one of the first things. Obviously, you want to be in control of your classroom, give students place for freedom and creativity, but also like you want to always kind of have that under control, right? So the way this works is, as a teacher, I have plenty of different configurations available to me. So with one click, I can go between presentation room, discussion room, multiple breakout rooms. It's literally one click. And so what happens then, students get like this little notification that says your teacher started breakout rooms, you say go, and then everybody so it goes into that configuration. So like when you start a presentation room, everybody just automatically takes a seat. So like then they are like sort of huddled up around your screen share, and like if they want to ask a question, they can raise their hand or they can come forward. So like visually, I can see that the student wants to talk and they don't feel intimidated to interrupt, to ask a question. So it's like really the social cues. The other thing that we notice, like, students do have sort of this freedom of movement, but there's also accountability that's cut because everybody can see everybody at all times, just like in a real space, right? A student can always get up and start running around the classroom, but they don't do it. Why don't they do it, right? And the reason is because there's that sort of social pressure, I guess, to do the ethics of kind of how people behave in virtual. And what was interesting initially when we had a lot of folks moving from like Zoom environment to our environment, it was so interesting. Like their first experience was like literally just going around and running around, and then they would calm down. Like,
how do you get the zoomies
okay.
out? Like just explore, and then all right, now I've got that done.
It's like we're free.
Oh man, people want to break free from Zoom. Now, what your focus specifically on educators? What group of educators are you focused on? Just college? I mean, high school? Like what grouping are you imagining this tool will be used for?
Yeah, so what we have seen, when we started, like it really just spread by word of mouth. Like academia is like such a connected environment. So someone tried it and then they started sending to their friends, and then we just kind of spread by word of mouth very organically. So, we have teachers from K-12 using our platform. We're mainly focused in higher ed, whether it's community colleges or large schools or small schools. Really, it's a whole spectrum. And then there's also a lot of interesting use cases in any sort of learning environment, like professional development. So for K-12, has been very interesting. And so our focus as a company is we're directly focusing on higher ed, and we're also partnering up with others for adjacent markets, right? Whether it's professional development in K-12, et cetera, because InSpace integrates very easily with other platforms. For example, we're integrated with LMSs, right? Learning management systems. So for me as a teacher, tech burn is real, and people have tried so many things during pandemic. And I was like, we want to make this super easy, super easy to get in, no installations, no logins. I don't even need to register for an account. I just go to my LMS, click, and I'm right here. And then when you're done with your reading, all your recordings and transcripts automatically go back to your LMS, so you can search it and use it. And I'm actually super excited to announce that we're going to have language support coming up very soon. We're integrating with a company where you can real time have chat translations and recording transcript translations.
Speaking of what you were just digging into there around the making it easy for someone to just jump right in, just confirming, is that actually just browser based? Like there's no application that's needed?
Yes, so we're completely browser based and also integrated in LMS. So like as a teacher or professor, you can go into your LMS like Canvas, Brightspace or Moodle, and right there you see InSpace, you click on it, you see the virtual classroom, you can see who is in the space at that time from outside, and then you click to join. When you show up, it's your InSpace experience. And then when you're done, like all of your recordings of everything goes back and gets, stored there. And we have integration with, authentication systems. So we use your school authentication to get you in and out. So you don't even have to create an account.
Safety is still a big concern and issue for a lot of folks, and for kids of all ages or people of all ages. And many schools are still considering, do we come back in person all, or do we just do online? You feel strongly that online learning is definitely here to stay, right?
It's interesting. So I think schools are really all over the place right now. There are schools that are staying online, they're in between hybrid, and there's in person. So our goal is really take the technology out of the way and let teachers do what they're really good at, right? So as a company, as a platform, we actually don't don't care where people are using InSpace, right? So for example, when pandemic first started, a lot of schools were just virtual. So they were using completely virtual version of it. And then when a lot of schools some of the schools went back to in person, they actually took InSpace with them. So now they're using it in the classroom. So when you are sharing something with your students, or we have a chat functionality in there so you can communicate with students certain files, etc., or like you're doing pair coding in the classroom. And the other thing that came up is like sometimes some students had to quarantine or they couldn't make it to class. They joined virtually, and then from teachers' perspective, it's very easy. Like instead of sharing their slides on the projector, they share the presentation room, and students are basically all virtually huddled up around the presentation room, and they can just pop onto the screen anytime and ask questions. So basically, they're not getting the side experience of the hybrid. They're literally fully experiencing the same as in-person students. And then the other thing that we also noticed that was kind of unexpected use case is like how online completely asynchronous schools are looking at this. And we're very early on in this stage, but basically kind of, having completely asynchronous course where students are always interacting with content, but not necessarily have synchronous components to it. It can feel very lonely experience. And sometimes like it's really not great for retention. And so what InSpace does, it basically has this virtual classroom that's available for students anytime. And that becomes a study lounge, right? You can just communicate through the phone. And like if someone has a question, maybe someone else answers, and then you're just like, hey, do you want to pop into the space and talk about this? And you just go in there, you share a document, you work on it together, and it sort of becomes like this community.
Virtual classroom. Now, there's been definitely a huge growth in, I was thinking the business use case of Slack rooms or, Slack channels. There's classroom equivalents and different apps and stuff. But you're not just talking about just a chat room. It's this virtual space that you can jump in and people can see other people, and this 2D metaverse mentality, 2D immersive experience.
Absolutely. So each course has a virtual classroom or study space associated with it. And students can join there. So teachers get to choose, like you either get to choose to leave it open outside of the classroom time, so students can use it as a study lounge anytime they want. And then, so what we have is like something called persistent chat. So when you're in the space, there's the chat, it's multi-channel chat, etc. But when you finish your class, that chat stays in your LMS and on your phone app. So you can actually continue the conversation around the topics that started in the classroom and sort of have that discussion, and you can tag someone and ask questions. Say like it's 11 o'clock and you have a 12 a.m. deadline and you're stuck. You're like, hey guys, anyone else stuck? Which guaranteed there's probably a lot more people. So then you're like, you talk on the chat, and then you're like, okay, do you want to just have an in-person meeting so we can work on this together? So you basically have that classroom that's always available to you. You can pop into there, have a conversation. You don't have to worry about scheduling, sending the links, etc.
So you started this last year. You launched this 2020.
Yep.
This growth, and what's the adoption been like? Then you hinted at a few pieces, but what's that been look like from the different educators and universities and teachers?
Yeah, so we have grown very organically. So, basically what happened is like I was trying to come up with a solution for myself. So like when I go back in fall of 2020, I had the solution for my classroom, which thankfully I did. And it was like an amazing lift. And so my co-founder has been in video conferencing space for like 15 years. So we basically brought a lot of that into this platform. And so, yeah, and then basically what happened is I sent it to a colleague, and then she sent to others in the college. I think it was like a few days later, the president calls me and he's like, yeah, I don't know what InSpace is, but everybody wants it. Like, can we see it? How do we get this? And so I showed a demo. They immediately bought into it, and we signed our first deal. So we're basically building the platform, but we already had real customers at the same time, which was awesome.
That is
no pressure, right? And so what happened then is basically people started sending to other people that they knew in academia. And then it really just spread by word of mouth. We started hearing from a lot of schools. Like I think like immediately, like at one point we had like this support inbox that we didn't monitor initially. So I go in there, there's like, I don't know, thousands of emails sitting there, like people wanting to see the platform. So eventually we got around to getting back to them and, started signing schools. Fast forward today, we're in over 120 schools and growing fast. And yeah.
Wow. Now this is particularly you're focused on larger institutions, so it's a significant rollout, right? It's not like, hey, let me sign up and use it just for my class. Anna's instructor could do that.
Yeah, so it's really a mix of different sort of levels. So basically, we have schools that are department level, and we have enterprise level, or we have like small teams like that. We're super excited to move fast. So it's really a combination of things.
Okay, because I'm wondering for some viewers out there that they may just be running their own professional development or different things that are going. Is this something that they could just sign up and use? What does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So if they go to inspace.chat, they can actually sign up for a 2-week free trial and experience it. It works beautifully in any environment where you have learning, collaboration, interacting. And we have definitely seen other groups use it as an internal tool for their company. We use this in our company for our stand-ups and all our meetings, all hands meetings, etc. It just gives you like a little more interactive space to do things that you kind of need to do. So yeah, our goal is to stay focused on our customers in education, but we do realize it's useful in all the other sort of environments, whether it's corporate learning, etc. But we're just not focusing on really on those markets at this moment.
So you're not focused on building features and solutions for any other markets, but if somebody else wants to sign up for it and pay you money for it, you won't say no.
Exactly.
Gotcha. When you ponder on the future, I mean, coming back to what we talked about earlier, the metaverse, I mean, someone just strapping on an Oculus and interacting, in VR, is this really just like that stepping stone, since not everyone has VR headsets? What do you see as that future look like for the metaverse?
It's interesting. So I did experience Metaverse a few times. Like I was like watching Dreamscape, like experience Dreamscape and others. And, it's definitely very interesting. It's definitely very, very early in that technology still. Like we have lengths to go. And I'm excited to see where it lands. We're in spaces. So, well, technology is one of the things, right? Like there's a whole adoption curve when you have like a thing you have to wear on your head, all that stuff. So what's exciting about InSpace, it's like it's available right now, but it also kind of you can look at it as a stepping stone towards that more interactive, immersive experience. But the way I kind of look at this is more like as a communication medium, right? So if you think about it, like try to imagine the world before email, right? I'll give you a minute. It's gonna probably take a minute. So like, if I'm a teacher in a campus, I would have to get up and go across the campus to talk to other teachers and hope that they're in their offices, right? And then that was the world we lived in. So then, email comes around, and now like I just send an email and that's it. Like I don't have to walk, and like it's a time thing, right? So but there's certain things you can't get done with email, right? Like, there's a lot of back and forth communication and confusion, and people are not sure. And sometimes like having a quick check in and sync is so much more helpful. So the way we see InSpace, it's really that next level of that communication platform. Like it's the next level of email, right? You basically have that space available for people where they can quickly check in. And a lot of schools, for example, whether it's admissions office or registrar's office or library, they would have those drop-in hours, and students can just stop by, ask questions, and move on. Versus, writing a paragraph of what the situation is and describing. Now you're, testing your writing skills, and then students are like, all right, I probably don't. I'm going to just pass on this. So sort of creating that connected medium where like students just feel comfortable going and asking questions. And I think there's a ton of value in in-person instruction from traditional school perspective. And that's going to be there. Like we're not here to replace that. Like we're not saying, everything should be online, but it's really, you should have this available to you when you need it.
Mm. So when you look at the future for InSpace, and let's talk about the near future. Next year, but as of the recording, I don't know when this launches, but it's still 2021. What are you most excited about? What's coming up and what you can share on the roadmap?
It's interesting. What I'm excited is sort of different ways that new technology can really shape how we view things, right? And sort of question like some things, and then really just elevate and change things. For example, online education, right? So like it's very flexible and affordable in most cases. What we but it sometimes lacks that community piece to it and that interaction piece and sort of that FaceTime where like, you graduate and people from there. For example, me and my co-founder, we went to the same college, and when we interacted with each other. And so like, was that like 10, however many years later, we started a company together. So that's like the kind of bonds that you form in college. And I think that experience is a huge part of why you go to college, right? And, historically, going to classes was about getting information. But now we live in such an information-rich world where like you can just go on YouTube and Google so-and-so's lecture and it probably pop up. So I think now it's the value is in being there with students and like, really just hands-on experiences and connections and like really helping them, motivating them to go and pursue another career step, right? And so to do that, like we really need like those active environments. So the way I see this is like really InSpace kind of pushes that online education experience just a little closer towards traditional, but in a different level where you still have flexibility, still is affordable, but sort of gives you like some of the benefits of the traditional.
For those that want to learn more, there's a lot here, and we just got a taste of it. You can head over to inspace.chat. So that's inspace.chat. Thank you, Narine, for sharing, giving a taste of what you're building and kind of the future then of communication and interacting in education sphere. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And we'll look forward to seeing you all on the next episode of UpTech Report. Have you seen a company using AI, machine learning, or other technology to transform the way we live, work, and do business? Go to uptechreport.com and let us know.